He understood that the modern world was built on noise. Every ping, every text, every alert was a call to scatter attention. But when he began the path of retention, something shifted. His impulses softened, his reactions slowed, and his awareness deepened. It wasn't about suppressing desire, it was about learning to listen before responding. He realized that presence itself could be transmitted, even through the cold light of a phone screen. Each word he sent began to carry the calm weight of someone rooted in silence. In the early days, he used to text with urgency. He feared silence. He feared losing attention. But as his practice matured, he saw that the space between messages carried more power than any clever phrase. Silence became his punctuation. Patience became his grammar. Women didn't feel chased, they felt seen. And yet he wasn't doing it to be seen at all. He was simply being. He learned that semen retention was not merely physical, it was psychological restraint. It was a spiritual economy where energy once wasted in seeking validation became fuel for inner composure. When he typed, his words no longer spilled out in restless hunger. They emerged from stillness, steady and alive. In that stillness, every message became rare, deliberate, and magnetic. He began to notice something subtle. His energy lingered even when he said little. A simple message, "How's your day?" carried a frequency of calm that others could feel. It wasn't what he said, but where he said it from. Retention made his energy grounded, and grounded energy communicates authenticity without effort. He discovered that communication was not the exchange of words, but the meeting of frequencies. Most people spoke from depletion, few spoke from fullness. The retained man spoke from overflow. His calm didn't seek. It invited. His patience didn't manipulate. It reassured. His silence didn't withhold. It resonated. When others rushed to reply, he waited. When others feared delay, he breathed. And this patience was not strategy, it was surrender. He trusted the rhythm of connection. He understood that attraction, like nature, cannot be forced. It can only unfold in alignment. His messages reflected the rhythm of a river, not the noise of a storm. There was a grace that began to color his interactions. People started confiding in him, drawn not by words but by presence. His conversations turned from performance into communion. The more he conserved his vital energy, the more his digital expression became intimate, even sacred. His phone was no longer a weapon of persuasion. It became an instrument of awareness. He saw how the world rewarded speed, quick replies, instant gratification, endless engagement. But true power lay in measured attention. The retained man communicated with intention, not compulsion. He spoke only when he meant something, and when he spoke, others listened not because he demanded attention, but because his attention itself was rare. He realized that discipline in the body became clarity in the mind, and clarity in the mind became elegance in communication. Retention trained his nervous system to rest, and in that rest, intuition sharpened. He began to sense tone, timing, and emotion without analysis. His awareness became his charisma. The practice turned him into a mirror. His calm exposed the noise in others. Some felt peace around him. Others felt unease, because his silence reflected their restlessness. Yet he didn't judge either. He understood that everyone was learning to speak from their own level of energy. His job was not to change them, but to remain centered. With time, texting became meditation. Every message was a test of awareness. Was he speaking from need or from being? Retention gave him the space to pause before reacting, to choose consciousness over compulsion. That pause, invisible yet powerful, became the essence of his presence. When he communicated, he wasn't performing confidence. He was radiating calm certainty. This was not about making an impression, but about embodying truth. His discipline whispered louder than words. People could sense, even through text, that his energy was not fragmented. He understood that attraction was not a chase, but a reflection. When he stopped leaking energy outward, the world began to reflect his wholeness. Texting, then, was not about getting attention, it was about expressing alignment. He didn't try to be interesting. He simply was interested, and that difference changed everything. There were days when he felt the temptation to revert to message impulsively, to seek validation. But he watched those impulses like clouds crossing a still sky. He didn't fight them, he observed them. Over time, observation turned into liberation. His communication became effortless, because his consciousness was unhurried. He began to see energy as currency. Every word spent from insecurity cost him presence. Every message sent from peace amplified it. Retention taught him that energy, like wealth, grows through wise investment. The less he spent on proving himself, the more magnetism accumulated around him. Eventually, he realized that mastery in communication was not about saying more, but needing less. The retained man had nothing to prove because he already lived in self-approval. That inner sufficiency turned his texts into reflections of abundance. People felt seen, not sold to, understood, not impressed. He also discovered humility within discipline. Retention didn't make him superior, made him aware. He could now feel the subtle difference between attraction born of ego and connection born of presence. His communication no longer aimed to conquer but to connect. Each conversation became an extension of meditation. His phone no longer pulled him away from consciousness. It became a field where awareness could express itself. Even a simple emoji or one-line message carried vibration when sent from stillness. He noticed how women, friends, and strangers alike began to respond differently, not because he tried to be someone, but because he stopped trying altogether. His restraint created mystery, and his authenticity created safety. In that paradox, attraction deepened naturally. His words became rare and precious. Like pearls drawn from deep water, they carried the depth of silence. They emerged from... People began to wait for his replies, not out of anxiety, but anticipation. Because they knew his attention was never casual, it was sacred. In time, he understood that semen retention was not a technique for attraction. It was a return to sacred communication. To retain was to remember his own completeness, his capacity to give without losing himself. When he spoke from that remembrance, every message was an offering of awareness. He realized that technology didn't weaken connection, distraction did. A retained mind could use a phone as a tool of mindfulness, not addiction. His communication became modern, yet ancient, digital, yet divine. He carried the silence of meditation into the vibration of every word. By the end of his journey, he no longer thought of texting as strategy. It became service. Every conversation was an opportunity to elevate, to reflect calmness in a restless world. And this quiet discipline, unseen yet powerful, made him magnetic, not because he wanted attention, but because he embodied attention itself. He learned that semen retention, at its essence, was about remembering the sacredness of energy, physical, emotional, verbal. When that energy aligned, even the smallest act of communication became luminous. In that light, attraction was no longer pursuit. It was resonance. And so he lived, not as one trying to impress, but as one fully expressed. His calm became his charisma. His restraint became his language. His silence became his signature. In a world addicted to noise, his stillness spoke loudest. He came to understand that mastery was never about control over others. It was always about harmony within himself. The deeper he went into retention, the more he realized that every word, every message, every glance was an expression of inner alignment. Communication was no longer about chasing or convincing. It became a mirror of energy. The words he once used to seek attention now carried the vibration of stillness. They no longer reached out, they drew in. In a world that rewards reaction, he chose reflection. While others rushed to reply, to fill the silence, to keep the conversation alive, he learned to breathe, to let space exist. That pause became his power. It told others something his words never could, that his energy wasn't scattered. He was full, complete, at peace. This is the essence of semen retention, not a practice of suppression, but of transmutation. When energy is preserved, it refines the mind. It clears the fog of neediness and amplifies the light of presence. In that clarity, communication becomes art. A text isn't just words on a screen. It's a transmission of awareness. People feel the difference. They sense the calm behind the message, the groundedness in the tone, the subtle balance between curiosity and detachment. He realized that the most powerful texts weren't written to impress, they were written from truth. When you are centered, you don't need to prove your worth through words. Your silence already speaks it. You no longer text to fill a void. You text to share a vibration. This is why semen retention changes communication. It brings your energy home, and when your energy returns to you, so does your power. Modern life is a storm of overstimulation. Notifications pull at the mind, and conversations move faster than consciousness can follow. But the retained man stands apart, not because he isolates himself, but because he doesn't allow himself to be consumed. His focus is rare. His attention is pure, and that purity is what makes his presence magnetic. When he texts, the other person feels that rare clarity, like a still lake reflecting the sky. It's not about the words anymore. It's about the weight behind them. Energy always precedes language. If the energy is scattered, the message feels forced. But if the energy is still, even a simple good morning carries gravity. That's why retention is the unseen foundation of charisma. It isn't in technique, it's in vibration. He learned that true communication has rhythm, inhale and exhale, message and silence, presence and patience. The modern mind fears silence, but silence is where truth gathers strength. When you can be comfortable with quiet, you give others space to lean in. You become the still point in their spinning world. Through retention, he discovered that power doesn't shout, it radiates. The same principle applies to communication. The man who can hold his energy, his emotions, his impulses, he doesn't need to prove himself through words. His restraint itself becomes his language. People listen not because of what he says, but because of who he is when he says it. Attraction, in its purest form, is not something you create. It's something you allow. It is resonance between two energies, vibrating in truth. When a man embodies discipline, presence, and purpose, he becomes an anchor in a drifting world. That's what draws others. the sense of safety and mystery that comes from someone who is fully in control of himself, yet free from control over others. He realized that the digital space, texting, social media, messaging, was not the enemy of authenticity. It was simply another mirror. If you bring mindfulness into it, it reflects depth. If you bring insecurity, it reflects confusion. The power lies not in the platform, but in the person behind the message. Retention gave him that reminder. Energy is neutral. Intention gives it direction. He learned to see every interaction as an exchange of energy. When he texted from distraction, he lost presence. When he texted from calm, he amplified it. Over time, even his briefest messages carried stillness. And that stillness became irresistible, not because it promised excitement, but because it offered peace. In the end, he understood that the goal was never to be irresistible to others. It was to be irresistible to his own higher self. To live in alignment so deeply that every part of him spoke the same language: focus, patience, and grace. That is the real magnetic field, not one that pulls people in artificially, but one that inspires them to rise. The world will always teach men to chase validation, pleasure, attention. But the retained man learns the opposite, that what is meant for him will flow naturally when he holds his ground. He doesn't chase, he attracts. He doesn't beg, he receives. Not because he's entitled, but because he's aligned. At the end of his journey, he smiled at how simple it all was. When you master your energy, you master your presence. When you master your presence, you master your communication. And when your communication flows from awareness, you no longer need to seek connection, you are connection. The truth is this: semen retention doesn't make you superhuman. It reminds you that you already are human, whole, awake, and aware. It strips away the noise until only clarity remains. And in that clarity, every action, every word, every message becomes sacred. He realized that real attraction begins not with the words you send, but with the energy you hold when you send them. A retained man doesn't text to gain attention. He texts to express presence. He doesn't seek validation. He offers vibration. In that offering, he becomes rare. So, as the screen dims and the world pulls you back into its rhythm, remember this: your power doesn't lie in how many people respond to you. It lies in how deeply you respond to yourself. Preserve your energy, refine your awareness, and let your words emerge from stillness. That's the secret to timeless communication. In the end, the man who holds his energy holds his destiny. Every message, every breath, every moment becomes an expression of alignment. He doesn't chase, he magnetizes. He doesn't impress, he expresses. He doesn't talk to be heard, he speaks to share truth. And that is the quiet, undeniable power of a retained mind in a distracted world. Ready to prove you were here? 2 quick things. First, absolutely crush the like button and subscribe. Don't miss the next level of power. Second, tell me where you're dominating. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. For behind-the-scenes insights and direct Q&A, you need to be in the Telegram channel. The link is in the description. Help someone else find their power. Share this video immediately.